Oh, Ezekiel 40 is going to be a much nicer chapter than the last two. So we can see this progression that has happened of destruction and then cleansing and then being prepared and ready for greater things that are coming, basically. And Ezekiel 40 is those greater things that we get to learn about. Now, here, Hugh Nibley made a comment about this chapter. He said, Chapter 40 reverts to the cosmic charts of the temple with sacred measurements and numbers of the place presented in the sight of the people. Ezekiel's testament to prosperity ends with his presentation of a layout of the heavenly Jerusalem, the earthly counterpart of the heavens. So we're going to see some really cool things, this grand vision of the future of Jerusalem, the future city, New Jerusalem, if you will. Okay, now what's interesting is the word temple comes from the word template. They're related. It is a pattern that is designed to help us. Why do we use the temple? It is a pattern, a template to use to improve our life with. That's the temple. We're going to learn a lot about the future temple in New Jerusalem today. Verse 1. So in the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after that the city was smitten, in the selfsame day the hand of the Lord was upon me and brought me thither. So 25 years after 597 BC, and 14 years after Jerusalem was destroyed, basically. So 25 years into the captivity, 14 years after the second exile happened, basically, is when this is going to take place. Now realize chapter 40 is going to, so really chapters 40 through 48, we're going to learn a lot about temples in the next 8 chapters, basically. That's what we're going to spend a lot of time on with these chapters. So a lot of fun stuff for us to learn. Verse 2, in the visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel and set me upon a very high mountain, by which was the frame of a city on the south. So there's a frame on the city here. Now let's talk, we're going to talk a lot about these designs and ideas. So I kind of want to give us a more modern kind of review of it, and then we'll go through what Ezekiel's saying here. And a great place to get this is from James E. Talmage when he describes this in his book, The House of the Lord. He says, in the 25th year of the Babylonian captivity, while yet the people of Israel were in exile in a strange land, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Ezekiel. The power of God rested upon him, and he saw a vision in a glorious temple, the plan of which he minutely described. As to whether the prophet himself considered the design so shown as one to be subsequently realized, or as but a grand yet unattainable ideal, is not declared. Certain it is that the temple of the vision has not yet been builded. In most of its essential features, Ezekiel's ideal followed closely the plan of Solomon's temple. So close indeed is the resemblance that many of the details specified by Ezekiel have been accepted as those of the splendid edifice destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. A predominant characteristic of the temple described by Ezekiel was the spaciousness of its premises and the symmetry of both the holy house and its associated buildings. The area was to be a square of 500 cubits, walled about and provided with a gateway and arches on each of 3 sides. On the west side the wall was to be unbroken by arch or portal. At each of the gateways were little chambers regarded as lodges and provided with porches. In the outer court were the other chambers. The entire area was to be elevated, and a flight of steps led to each gateway. In the inner court was seen the great altar, standing before the house and occupying the center of a square of 100 cubits. Ample provision was made for every variety of sacrifice and offering, and for the accommodation of the priests, the singers, and all engaged in the holy ritual. The main structure comprised a porch, a holy place, and an inner sanctuary of most holy place. The last named elevated above the rest and reached by steps. The plan provided for even greater exclusiveness than had characterized the sacred area of the Temple of Solomon. The double courts contributed to this end. The service of the temple was prescribed in detail. the ordinances of the altar, the duties of the priests, the ministry of the Levites, the regulations governing oblations and feasts were all set forth. The immediate purpose of this revelation through the vision of the prophet appears to have been that of awakening the people of Israel to a realization of their fallen state and a conception of their departed glory. So that's kind of a high-level view of what we're going to talk about through this, basically. So now let's get into this, okay? So he's on this high mountain. He's seeing a frame of a city on the south, from south of where he's at. So verse 3, he brought me thither, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand and a measuring reed. He stood in the gate. So he's in the gate of the city, and he's got instruments to basically kind of like this measuring reed, a line of flax. So this is abilities to measure straight lines. So think of like rulers, think of tape measures type ideas, basically. Verse 4, and the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I show thee. For to the intent that I might show them unto thee art thou brought hither. Declare all that thou seest to the house of Israel. So he's like, you're here to testify of what I'm going to show you, is basically what that means. Verse 5, and behold a wall on the outside of the house round about, and in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long. Okay, now the cubit is 6 cubits long. A cubit is a handbreadth of each. So like that's a cubit, basically. So each would be about 21 inches or 53 centimeters, and the total length of the measuring reed is about 10.5 feet or 3.2 meters. So that's the reed. So that gets us our cubit measurement. That gets us breadth. Breadth of the hand, I think that's actually more of this, sorry, for cubit. And then the rod, the reed, it's a stick, basically, that's 10.5 feet long. So he says, measuring the reed of 6 cubits long by the cubit and a hand breadth. So he measured the breadth of the building 1 reed, and the height 1 reed. Then he came to the gate which looketh toward the east, and went up the stairs thereof, and measured the threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad, and the other threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad, so 10.5 feet wide. Every little chamber was 1 reed long and 1 reed broad, so square 10.5 foot chamber inside. And between the little chambers were 5 cubits, and the breadth of the gate by the porch of the gate was 1 reed. So he's small cubits and a reed for longer measurements. He measured this is verse 8, he measured also the porch of the gate within 1 reed. Then measured he the porch of the gate 8 cubits, and the post thereof 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was inward. And the little chambers of the gate eastward were 3 on this side, 3 on that side, and they were of 1 measure. And the posts had 1 measure on this side and on that side. So realize that Ezekiel in this vision is seeing this city, and he is with this guy, who this guy looks like brass, so he's probably really shiny, like, light coming off of him type of idea. And he is going around measuring the city, measuring these key things, measuring the opening of the gates, measuring the different buildings inside. So this is measuring the temple grounds, basically. And he's telling Ezekiel, you need to testify of this. So it's as if Ezekiel's like writing down these measurements, basically, as this guy is giving it to him. Let's see, verse 11, he measured the breadth of the entry of the gate 10 cubits, and the length of the gate 13 cubits. The space also before the little chambers was 1 cubit on this side, and the space was 1 cubit on that side. The little chambers were 6 cubits on this side and 6 cubits on that side. He measured the gate from the roof of one little chamber to the roof of another. The breadth was 5 and 20 cubits, door against door. He made also posts of 60 cubits, even unto the posts of the court round about the gate. From the face of the gate, or the front, basically the entrance, unto the face of the porch of the inner gate were 50 cubits. And there were narrow windows to the little chambers, and their posts within the gate round about, likewise to the arches, and windows were round about inward, and upon each post were palm trees. So these are like, the posts were kind of like palm tree stalks, basically. Verse 17, then he brought he me into the outward court. And lo, there were chambers, and a pavement made for the court round about. 30 chambers were upon the pavement. And the pavement by the side of the gates over against the length of the gates was the lower pavement. Then he measured the breadth from the forefront of the lower gate unto the forefront of the inner court, without 100 cubits eastward and northward. And the gate of the outward court that looked toward the north, he measured the length thereof and the breadth thereof. And the little chambers thereof were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. And the posts thereof and the arches thereof were after the measure of the first gate. The length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth 25 cubits. And their windows and their arches and their palm trees were after the measure of the gate that looked toward the east. And they went up unto it by 7 steps, and the arches thereof were before them. And the gate of the inner court was over against the gate of the north, and toward the east. And he measured from gate to gate 100 cubits. And after that he brought me toward the south. And behold, a gate toward the south. And he measured the posts thereof and the arches thereof according to these measures. So he's not saying they're measured the same as these other ones, basically. Verse 25, and there were windows in it, and in the arches thereof round about. Like those windows, the length was 50 cubits, the breadth 25 cubits. There were 7 steps to go up to it. The arches thereof were before them. It had palm trees, one on this side and another on that side upon the post thereof. There was a gate in the inner court toward the south, and he measured from the gate to gate toward the south 100 cubits. And he brought me to the inner court by the south gate, and he measured the south gate according to these measures. So he's measured the outer court. If you think of the wandering tabernacle, that was the tabernacle of the congregation. Now he's in the inner court areas, the smaller building, so the holiest place. Then the Holy of Holies is inside that. Verse 29, and the little chambers thereof, and the posts thereof, and the arches thereof, according to these measures, that there were windows in it, and in the arches thereof round about. It was 50 cubits long, and 25 cubits broad. And the arches round about were 25 cubits long, and 5 cubits broad. And the arches thereof were toward the outer court, or outer court, basically. And the palm trees were upon the posts thereof, and the going up to it had 8 steps. And he brought me into the inner court toward the east, and he measured the gate according to these measures. And the little chambers thereof, and the posts thereof, and the arches thereof were according to these measures, and there were windows therein, and in the arches thereof round about. It was 50 cubits long, and 25 cubits broad. And the arches thereof were toward the outward court. Palm trees were upon the posts thereof, on this side and on that side, and the going up to it had 8 steps. And he brought me to the north gate, and measured it according to these measures. The little chambers thereof, the posts thereof, the arches thereof, the windows to it around about, the length was 50 cubits, the breadth 25 cubits. And the posts thereof were toward the outer court. Palm trees were upon the posts thereof, on this side and on that side, and on the going up to it had 8 steps. So that's kind of just helping you to see the idea of what this looks like. And the chambers and the entries thereof were by the posts of the gates, where they washed the burnt offering. So this is it. So you can get the idea. So now we're in the courtyard again. This is by the area where they washed the burnt offerings, okay, when they brought the sacrifices in. And in the porch of the gate were 2 tables on this side, 2 tables on that side, to slay thereon and burnt the burnt offering and the sin offering and the trespass offering. So this is very similar, again, to, if you think of the tabernacle, the wandering tabernacle, very similar dimensions, very similar to the Solomon's temple, which is based on the wandering tabernacle, basically. He's measuring the temple, describing it to him. So verse 40, and at the side without, as one goeth up to the entry of the north gate, were 2 tables. And on the other side was at the porch of the gate were 2 tables. 4 tables were on this side, 4 tables on that side, by the side of the gate, 8 tables, whereupon they slew their sacrifices. So they could handle a lot of sacrifices at each of the gates because of how many tables and opportunities they had to do this. Verse 42, and the 4 tables were of hewn stone for the burnt offering, of 1.5 cubits long, and 1.5 cubits broad, 1 cubit high, whereupon also they laid the instruments wherewith they slew the burnt offering and the sacrifice. And within were hooks and hand broad. Fastened round about upon the tables was the flesh of the offering. So you can see this idea of these 3 gates with entryways into the temple area, the courtyard. Tables, lots of tables set up. They have this very organized, orderly way of dealing with all of these ordinances that are being done, the sacrifices that are coming in, basically. Verse 44, and without the inner gate were the chambers of the singers in the inner court, which was at the side of the north gate. And their prospect was toward the south, one at the side of the east gate, having the prospect toward the north. So these were people could be singing, chanting, offering musical prayers and things. Verse 45, and he said unto me, this chamber, whose prospect is toward the south, is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the house. So that's over in that area is where they would stay. Verse 46, and the chambers whose prospect is toward the north is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, among the sons of Levi, which come near to the Lord to minister unto him. So coming near to the Lord, these are the priests that go to the inner courtyards, the holiest place, and the holy of holies and things to get to do the sacrifices there, where they would have put the Ark of the Covenant inside there, basically. Now, the Old Testament study manual makes this comment. They say the heavenly messenger explained to Ezekiel that the Levites who would keep charge of the holy house would be the sons of Zadok. Now, Zadok was a righteous high priest in the days of King Solomon. Zadok replaced Abiathar, 1 Kings chapter 2, because of his loyalty to David and Solomon. Zadok was the first high priest to officiate in Solomon's temple. Apparently, the Lord desired the descendants of the righteous Zadok to officiate in the latter-day temple in Jerusalem. So that's what they're talking about. So these are like the descendants, the priesthood holders, basically, is what this is talking about. In fact, they get talked about in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, the sons of Zadok. Verse 47, so he measured the court 100 cubits long and 100 cubits broad, 4 square, and the altar that was before the house. And he brought me to the porch of the house and measured each post of the porch, 5 cubits on this side, 5 cubits on that side, and the breadth of the gate was 3 cubits on this side, 3 cubits on that side. The length of the porch was 20 cubits, and the breadth 11 cubits. And he brought me by the steps whereby they went up to it. And there were pillars by the posts, one on this side and another on that side. Now in Bloch's Book of Ezekiel, he talks about this. He says, Daniel Bloch notes that the difference in elevation increases with each unit in the sacred complex. As one moves from one outside toward the center, the scene is impressive. The observer's eyes are drawn ever upward to the top of this temple mount. So as you go from each courtyard, it goes up in steps, basically, to get higher. So the holiest place is at the top of the highest point, basically, of this area. So now that we've described this temple that Ezekiel has done, here's what a picture of it looks like. Let's show you the picture to give an idea, to kind of see how that would come together. So this is the temple, basically, that Ezekiel saw. So this is what he saw this in vision, basically, and he was told to take all this information to the people and give that to them to help them understand it. So now we're not done with this vision yet. So let's jump over to the next chapter as we continue. Remember, chapters 40 through 48 are all going to be about this temple. So we'll see you in the next chapter.